Welcome to today's Torah study. We're learning the mitzvah of the day, which actually is associated with the mitzvah of this week's Torah portion, but the origin of this verse today is from the book of Exodus. It is the mitzvah of repairing your friend's broken down BMW. It's very important. In the Torah BMW. If your friend's BMW breaks down or his Mercedes-Benz, you have to help him fix it. What's the verse in the Torah? Here it goes. It is a positive commandment to unload from the domestic animal of one's fellow man that is lying under its burden. So if your fellow's donkey broke down because he's crashing under his burden, which basically means his Audi broke down on the side of the I-95, then what do you have to do? You got to help him unload. Got to help him help his donkey. As scripture states, if you see the donkey of one that you hate, lying under its burden, your enemy's donkey, you shall surely help him. Exodus 23:5. Even if this was on its larger load, even if there was on it a larger load than was fit for it. This is actually today's Torah reading. In today's Torah reading, we read about how if your friend says to you, well, it's a mitzvah upon you to do this, it's not a mitzvah upon me. So you go ahead and fix my broken donkey. I'm going to sit here and just grab a smoke, right? Then you don't have to help him. It's today's Torah reading. Yeah, but if a guy gives you attitude, and
I'm not going to do anything, you just do it.
If the owner of the donkey says it's a mitzvah upon you to fix my broken car, but I'm not going to do anything, then you don't have to. That's today's chumash.
So you have to help me.
Yeah, if he does it like a mensch, participate, yeah. If it is one's duty to unload it for nothing without payment. However, an elder, for whom it is beneath his dignity, is free of the obligation. If one unloaded and reloaded on the animal, and it fell down again, he is duty bound to unload and load on it again, yet another time, even 100 times.
Maybe the loads is too much for the dog.
Well, you got to modify. As scripture states, you shall surely help him, and he has to walk with him as far as a parsang to make sure that all is now in order. You have to walk a parsang. Good question. Unless the owner of the load says, I do not anymore need you. So let's take a look at this mitzvah. First of all, welcome to Garrett and Elaine, to Corey and to Winston. Let's see. Yeah. I'm going to open it up in the Sefer HaChinuch, the book of Mitzvahs. This is a book that was written by Rabbi Aaron Alevi of Barcelona as a bar mitzvah gift to his son, 13th century. Sorry. Let's get find the exact mitzvah where it's located. It appears in Exodus chapter 23, verse 5. Let's find the original verse. You ready? Here it goes. The original verse says like this. When you see a donkey, that's about the law relating to enemies. When you see a donkey belonging to a fellow Jew whom you hate, and this donkey is crouching under its load, you must disregard your hatred and help the person unload his donkey. You are permitted to not help the person if doing so is beneath your dignity, if you're not strong enough. For example, you're an elder, or if the person has tried to entice others to serve idols. In all other cases, however, would you refrain from helping him? Just because there are cases in which you are allowed not to. Rather, you must help the person you hate to unload his donkey. Okay? This is the mitzvah. It's in Parshas Mishpatim. And check. Yeah. 23:5. Okay, we're getting close. I'm just finding it in the book of Chinuch, the book of education. Here. Okay. Mitzvah number 80 in the count of Sefer HaChinuch, in the count of the book of education. It goes like this. There are three mitzvahs that relate to one who encounters a load-bearing animal that is in distress. The first of the three, which is this mitzvah, requires that one assist the traveler in removing the load that is weighing down his animal, causing it to falter. This is known as prika. It's the mitzvah of prika, the mitzvah of unloading. Good morning, Mickey from Carthenia, Spain. Hi, good to see you. Mickey's going to be back on Thursday, God willing. So that's the mitzvah of prika. The mitzvah of prika is to remove the load. Well, you got to readjust it. Okay? There's another mitzvah, requires one further assist the owner in reloading the animal. That's another mitzvah. Allowing the owner to proceed to its destination. This is the mitzvah of te'ina, which is loading. One is the mitzvah of unloading, one of the 613 mitzvahs. Another one of the 613 mitzvahs is loading. In the mitzvah immediately preceding that one, the Torah prohibits ignoring the plight of one whose animal has faltered on its way. Right? So prohibiting the ignoring. So let's take a look in today's Torah reading. Today we read Parshas Kiseitse. Let's take a quick look at what the mitzvah is in today's reading. Offering assistance. Here it is. Similarly, you have been taught, this is today's Torah portion. It's different to Exodus. You must help that you must help someone unload his donkey when the donkey. We've been taught that you must help someone unload his donkey when the donkey is crouching on its load, even if that person is your enemy. Furthermore, you must not see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen under its load on the road and ignore it. That's today's Torah portion. Rather, once the load has been removed and the animal is back on its feet, you should pick up the load together with him and help him put it back on the animal. If however the owner tries to take advantage of your obligation to help him by demanding that you load the animal by yourself, you're exempt from doing so. So today's Torah portion is the mitzvah of ignoring, not to ignore. The other two times relating to your enemy's BMW is talking about unloading and reloading. So basically, what do we mean unloading? If his car broke down, you have to help him, fix it.
If you knew how. You have no idea how to fix it.
You know, I had an amazing story. I was driving down from New York once with my family, and we slept over in Savannah. We drove from Savannah about an hour south of Savannah. It was somewhere around like southern Georgia. Northern Florida, maybe. No, southern Georgia. We broke, what basically happened was there was a metal ladder in front of us on the road, came crashing into us, slashed the tire. So I managed to pull over, thank God no one hurt. And I was like, okay, how am I going to change the tire? I wouldn't even know how to change the tire.
May not even had a spare. This happened a couple years ago.
Not 5 minutes later, a pickup truck pulls up behind me. Shirtless guy comes out. I'm like, okay, it's going to be interesting. Claims his best friends are Jews of Indian descent. His name is Sean. And he says that he changes people's tires. And then he happens to have my exact tire in his car right now.
That sounds bizarre.
That's exactly what happened.
This happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
So just before COVID. And I was like, okay. So he changed my tire. And we just carried on driving. It was an amazing story. I mean, what are the odds of having my tire in his truck?
So this is a physical mitzvah, helping someone physically. Is there also a mitzvah helping someone with a burden if they're spiritually?
Like an emotional burden? I would imagine that it would be an extension. I would imagine it would be. That's what we're going to do in this book of Chinuch. That's what he does. He elaborates on the mitzvah. Let's take a look, okay? Let's see how much we can do over here. So we now know that there's 3 out of 613 commandments. The law of unloading, the law of reloading, and the law of not ignoring. We are commanded to remove the burden from upon an animal that is faltered with its load while on the road. As it's stated in Exodus, if you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching beneath its burden, you shall help repeatedly with him. Chinuch explains the various particulars of this verse, beginning with the term someone you hate. The enemy that is referred to in the verse is a Jew. Now, although one may normally not hate his fellow Jew, as it is written, you shall not hate your brother in his heart, which is referring to the Jew, the sages stated in Talmud Pesachim that this situation where one may harbor animosity towards his fellow Jew is possible in a case where one saw the owner of the animal commit the transgression in private. And he warned him not to sin, yet he did not desist. One is permitted to hate this person because he is a deliberate sinner. Now, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya tells us in chapter 32 that you're supposed to compartmentalize. You have to love him for the godly part within him, the piece of him which is your brother, but you have to hate him for the dysfunction within him. You have to hate him for the perversion within him. So it's not all or nothing. It's not binary. It's not black or white. You can love him and hate him at the same time. You understand?
You know, it sounds like it's a mitzvah of helping, but you just help people.
Yeah, but it's talking about someone that really is not your equal. You're talking about it's nice to help your teacher, your mentor, your someone you admire, but this is talking about somebody that you really actively despise. This is talking about like your political opponent. I mean, think about it, your competitor. This is where Schadenfreude would normally kick in, right? It's talking about Schadenfreude, where you derive great pleasure in seeing your enemy broken down, suffering. I mean, I can't. I once was walking home from shul over here, and I saw one of our a very easy to recognize Mercedes Benz broken down on the road right outside the shul. So I look at the guy and I'm like, Shabbos.
Is that when you said Shabbos, as opposed to lifting the car
You
up? and
couldn't
helping?
help him.
We could obviously help him with Shabbos, but I'm like, maybe.
If it's Shabbos and you see somebody who needs help and this and that, caring, are you supposed to say no to Shabbos?
Well, you can't do that on Shabbos. The violation of Shabbos is to look. Obviously, if he's broken down on Shabbos, you can't violate the Shabbos to get his car going. You know what I mean? But if it's a weekday, for sure you're supposed to.
They shouldn't be using their donkey. They should. However, if
Yeah,
it's
the
a
donkey
non-
you could help.
if it's non-
Well, no.
No,
if
still.
it's- so if it's a non-Jew, it's your friend, your neighbor, and this and that, and you see that he's broken down.
On Shabbos,
Let's say it's your neighbor.
first of all, the mitzvah doesn't apply to non-Jew.
I'm not saying-
With regards to non-Jew, it's just normal menschlichkeit. But it's a mitzvah for your brother, even if you hate him. But on Shabbos, you can't violate the Shabbos, even if it's a non-Jew. Do you know what I mean?
Unless it was to save a life.
Yeah, to save a life. Now, let's talk about the donkey here. Let's talk about the BMW, right? And that which the verse states donkey is not to indicate that this mitzvah pertains specifically to a donkey and not to any other animal. Rather, it applies to all other animals. The Torah merely spoke of the common situation as donkeys serve for the purpose of carrying burdens. So today it would be like a Volvo, Toyota.
That's a beast of burden.
Yeah. Now, what does it mean when it says, Azav Taziv Imo, you shall repeatedly help him? What does it mean you shall repeatedly help him in the verse? When it says Azav Taziv Imo, which means to say help him, the term Azav is from the same root as the term Vayazu Yerushalayim, and they fortified Jerusalem, in which the root denotes fortification. Now, what's the reason? That was just an etymological source. Good morning, Ed. Nice to see you. What is the origin, the reason for this mitzvah? Among the underlying purpose of this mitzvah is to train ourselves in the trait of compassion, which is a praiseworthy trait. You remember, a ganef is a thief. A thief is not someone who can steal, but someone who does steal. A scholar is not someone who can learn, but somebody who does learn. So too, a kind person is not somebody who's capable of kindness, it's somebody that actively demonstrates it. Compassion is something which is not a potential latent within you, but an actual expression upon you. Which, in teaching this, the Torah does not focus on a situation where the obligation to be compassionate is obvious, but on the one in which some might have overlooked it. It goes without saying that it is incumbent upon us to have compassion for a person who is in physical pain. So this requirement is not mentioned explicitly. It goes without saying. If your enemy who's broken down, it's a mitzvah to help him. How much more so your friend who's in pain? Right? There's your answer, Keith, about helping people that are in emotional pain. It goes without saying. Rather, the Torah teaches us here that even when someone is in distress over a potential monetary loss, even if it's just money, it is a mitzvah upon us to have compassion upon him to save him from his plight. The Talmud tells us that it takes one person to save a donkey buckling under its load. But to put that same load on the donkey in the first place would take, I think, 4 or 5 people. In other words, to help someone in a failing business, the donkey crushing, it's much easier. A small investment can help somebody whose business is failing versus a business that is already bankrupt and starting over again. It's going to cost you 5 times more. Right? So you've got to be compassionate and exercise alacrity in helping someone before they actually hit rock bottom, where it's actually a lot easier to assist them than when they're already buckled and already broken. So when you meet a fellow who is in pain, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial, it's a mitzvah to help them. It's a mitzvah to loan money interest-free to your fellow Jew. It's a prohibition to loan money with interest to your fellow Jew. It's a mitzvah to loan money with interest to non-Jews, but to your fellow Jew, you're not allowed to loan with interest unless you do something called a heter iska, which is a loophole kind of arrangement to allow you to get around it. It's like a partnership agreement. It's not a loan. But yeah, I mean, it's a mitzvah to help other people before they hit rock bottom. Right? Now, the Rebbe said it on the video on Friday. No, actually, the Rebbe said it on the video this coming Friday. You'll see it this coming Friday.
He will say.
Yeah, he will say. Have to stay strong. Our truckers with us. Good morning. Have to. Good to see you. You'll see it on Friday. The Rebbe is going to say that if it came to your attention, the Rebbe is talking about impacting other people and bringing Torah and mitzvahs to the furthest corners of the earth. If it came to your attention that a Jew is in need in a far out location, there's a reason why it came to your attention. Because you need to do something about it. If it had absolutely nothing to do with you, you would never have heard about it. Interesting, eh?
You heard that on the news, though.
Well, okay. The laws of it still, why are we watching the news that day? The laws of the mitzvah include several details pertaining to ownership of the animal and its burden. For example, the law that applies if the animal belongs to an idolater and a burden belongs to a Jew. If the animal belongs to an idolater and the burden belongs to a Jew, or vice versa. And the law of one who encounters his Jewish friend and his Jewish enemy, who each require assistance at the same time.
But what's an idolater?
In this latter case, the law is that it is a mitzvah to give precedence to the enemy and to assist him so as to subdue one's evil inclination. The Torah says you're supposed to assist your enemy's donkey, right? So the Torah is pretty explicit that you're supposed to help your enemy and, of course, your friend.
Your enemy's an idolater.
Yeah, but you got to subdue your evil inclination. And what happens when your enemy's an idolater? This is a very good question you asked there, Marty. A lot of rabbis are very upset with Chabad. How dare Chabad engage with Jews that are so secular that they're like sinful, idolaters, evil, whatever, right? And the Rebbe's approach, what do you mean? These are my brothers and sisters. I don't condone their behavior. I don't agree with what they do on Shabbos and their diets and who they marry and all that kind of stuff, but they're still my brother and sister. It's what the Alter Rebbe said about compartmentalizing. You're my brother. I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? You're my brother. I don't agree with your behavior, but that doesn't mean I have to judge you by your behavior. You are who you are. You're my brother forever, right? And I wish we could exhibit some of that in American politics today, where it's okay. You know, somebody actually said to me something about Trump. I don't know, something about how could anybody have anything to do with Trump? And I looked at him and I'm like, do you know what car you drive? The guy drives a BMW. And I'm like, you know the BMW built the gas chambers? From what I heard, I haven't verified this, but that Hitler actually took the engineers of BMW and Mercedes and he repurposed them to build the gas chambers, right? I'm like, so Trump is evil, but your car is okay because it's convenient for you to drive that car. So that's okay. But when somebody else, you know, it's not your political purview. Now this guy is now branded as a pariah. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is absurd. Let's just live and let live, right? Stop judging everybody. Would you want God to judge you so meticulously in the way that you judge other people? Let's be kind to other people. When we're kind to others, then God is kind to us. When we overlook their imperfections, then God overlooks our imperfections. But if you look out for everything, if you have a T radar looking out for anything which has the word Trump on it, or even the letter T, right? Then you know what kind of judgment God is going to give you? If you're so meticulous with others. I wish that we'd be able to have more of a cordial conversation in this country, where you know what, your brother-in-law disagrees with you politically, it's okay. He's still your brother-in-law. It doesn't mean you have to cut him off. Winston, good morning. Daniel, have to stay strong. Is it better to use ordinary car tires to make it easier and faster to help fellow Jews? Because it is something very particular will make it difficult for others to help. Winston, hold on. I think Winston wants to know if you should drive ordinary car tires so it'd be easier to help fellow Jews. Maybe your spare would be easier to help them. Because if it is something very particular, will make it difficult. Winston, I don't know. Can't answer that. I figure that people drive all sorts of cars. Get AAA. How about that? Get AAA. Even though AAA is worthless, hey, they take 14 hours to get to you. A new car? All new cars or just Audi?
I know, BMW, Audi, Mercedes, they'll do roadside assistance.
Really?
See?
You know, you have an Audi, you didn't know that.
I don't have an Audi.
No.
What do you know?
Sweden.
Well, that's why it doesn't do anything. Does it?
I go Scandinavia. Okay, let's go. Fine. So let's go a little further. And this applies even if his friend requires assistance to unload his animal and the enemy requires assistance to load his animal. One should note, however, the enemy mentioned here is not the same enemy as mentioned above, where you hate him on account of the sin. In the situation where you hate him on account of the sin, it is appropriate to harbor animosity toward the sinner, and one should not seek to curtail that animosity by awarding the sinner precedence. Rather, here we speak of a person with whom one's heart is not complete, where you bear a grudge for personal reasons. Ooh, this is a little heavy. Okay, fine. Let's go just a little bit. Now, this mitzvah applies in every location and at all times. It applies in the Turnpike and the 95. It applies in California and in Florida. Okay. For both men and women, one who transgresses this mitzvah has violated a mitzvah obligation, has displayed himself the trait of cruelty, which is a repugnant trait. Is that how you pronounce it? Repugnant? Repugnant. That G is repugnant. It's repugnant trait. With regards to such a person, the sages have stated, whoever is not compassionate towards God's creatures is not shown compassion by heaven. For his physical being is not worthy of receiving compassion. I want you to think about this, guys, for a second. Maybe God sent you an enemy to tick you off, to challenge you, so that you have the opportunity of overcoming your natural instinct, so that God will judge you in the same way. Maybe the guy that annoys you, that political opponent of yours, right, is deliberately struggling before you so that you have the opportunity to show compassion to those that don't necessarily deserve your compassion, so that when you do so, you're forcing God to do the same for yourself, to give you kindness, compassion when you don't necessarily deserve it. So let's talk a little bit about the pain of animals. Tsar Bali Chaim. Tsar Bali Chaim is the pain of animals, which is a very important Torah concept. It's one of the 7 Noahide laws, 7 Noahide laws that were given to all mankind. One of them is not to rip the limb of a living animal. Why would anybody want to do that? To rip the limb of a living animal. Why would they want to do that? Well, before freezers were invented, if you wanted a steak, you don't want to kill the whole animal. Just rip a leg off. And the animal stays fresh. That's what they used to do.
No way.
That's what they used to.
Did you do that?
Hello, I was in South Africa last week, and the lions were enjoying a full-blown leg, like a leg. It must have been a horse's leg. Actually, in the other place down the road, we actually saw a full-blown giraffe. Maybe it was a giraffe that they were eating. Down there, we saw a giraffe skeleton, but maybe it was that they were having like takeaways. But there was a whole leg over there. But in olden times, that's exactly what people did before refrigeration. What are you gonna do? You want steak dinner?
The animal will die.
The animal would die. One leg, just one leg. But it was obviously incredibly cruel. The Torah prohibits it. The Torah prohibits it. So let's talk about cruelty to animals. In establishing the mitzvah to assist a fellow in unloading his animal, the Torah states you shall surely help him. The phrase of him teaches that the mitzvah of parika, unloading, requires one to assist with unloading a distressed animal only if the owner is also participating in the effort. If, however, the owner is present and capable of helping, but he's unwilling to participate, the mitzvah does not apply. Nevertheless, there is a separate obligation of Tsar Bali Chaim, the pain of living creatures, regarding which no such limitation is stated, and therefore applies even if the owner does not participate. You see an animal suffering, you got to help the animal. Even if the owner is such an animal, that he won't help, he won't participate. The difference between these obligations is that whereas one may not accept payment for performing the mitzvah of prika, unloading, he is permitted to accept payment for relieving the pain of an animal. Hence, if the owner refuses to participate, one must nevertheless unload the animal to relieve its suffering, but he may accept payment for it. Now, this would not apply to a BMW, which has roadside assistance. Rishonim, however, raised a difficulty with this matter. We've learned that an elderly or dignified individual who would not lower himself to unload his own animal is exempt from assisting with unloading his fellow's distressed animal. This exemption is derived from the verse pertaining to the mitzvah of unloading. But why does the elderly or a dignified individual not remain obligated to unload the animal under the requirement to relieve the animal of its pain? Right? Ramban explains that the exemption of an elderly or dignified individual refers only to a Torah scholar whom it is a mitzvah to honor. The mitzvah to honor a Torah scholar is greater than the mitzvah to relieve pain of animals. And a Torah scholar is therefore permitted to preserve his dignity even in a situation where an animal is enduring pain. Ran, however, argues that the exemption of an elderly or a dignified individual is not limited to a Torah scholar, but applies to any situation where, due to his status, the individual would not assist the animal if it were his own. The question, therefore, returns: why is there no obligation to relieve the animal's pain in such a situation? I mean, look, it's difficult for us to relate. Us American Jews, we take our animals very, very personally. We're closer to animals than to our children in many cases. We have a new member to the shul from Boston now. He's a very, very renowned veterinarian, yeah. But his practice is in Andover, so I'm not sure what the story is going to be. We'll see. But yeah, when people take the animals very seriously, it's very emotional law here. Let's see. Ran therefore explains that although there's an obligation to relieve the animal's pain, the needs of an animal do not take precedent over the needs of man. Man is permitted to use an animal for plowing and similar heavy labor, even though such an exertion certainly causes distress to the animal, right? And you're not allowed to do that to a human being, to plow, but you can do that to an animal. And he's permitted even to slaughter the animal. Think about this. You're allowed to slaughter the animal. You're allowed to eat it. Either for personal or for commercial purposes. Certainly, then, the Torah would not require a person to suffer indignity for the sake of an animal. Mengele would come home at night. May his name be cursed and erased and blotted out. Mengele.
Dr. Mengele.
Mengele from the Auschwitz. He would come home at night and his hands are dripping with blood of innocent people. And he wouldn't want to turn the light on because he didn't want to wake up his parrot. They don't want to disturb the sleep of his parrot. You have people that are kinder to the animals than they are to human beings. People like this. There are people like this. Certainly, then, the Torah would not require a person to suffer indignity for the sake of an animal. So bear in mind, when you take into consideration the fact that animals are created to serve us, the mandate of man, Adam and Eve, was to conquer the world, to use every resource in this world in the service of God Almighty. So it means that yeah, you are allowed to eat for the service of God. You are allowed to wear and you're allowed to use leather shoes to walk like a mensch, right? Thus, in any situation, again, the people that are, Greenpeace, they'll tell you, you're polluting the environment. You're not allowed to have too many children. But he's driving a car. Hello? Why are you wearing clothes? You should walk around naked, right? Not eat anything, not even plants, because you're murdering the tomatoes, right? What are you telling other people that they're polluting the environment? You're blowing up his SUV, right? You see what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. Thus, in any situation where assisting with unloading the animal would compromise a person's dignity, for which reason the mitzvah of parika and unloading does not apply. The obligation to relieve the animal's pain also does not apply. So there is a category difference here, which would make sense. Rather, the obligation to relieve the animal's pain requires only to refrain from inflicting pain on an animal without need, and to relieve an animal from pain in a situation where the person's dignity will not be compromised. Right? You can't say, well, I'm supposed to save the animals from pain, therefore I'm supposed to shut down, to blow up all the abattoirs. Nobody said that. Right? Not yet. But what it means is protecting animals from pain means not to inflict unnecessary pain, number one. And number two, it also means to help an animal from pain when it's not contrary to your dignity. But when you go fishing for sport, that's pure cruelty.
Right.
When you go hunting for sport, that's pure cruelty.
Catch and release is
Cruel. Catch and release. They do that in New York, no?
Do it all over. Do it here too.
In the jails in New York, they do catch and release.
Well,
Right, but it's cruelty. What are you doing? You see these fishermen, they catch a fish, rip its head off, and throw it back in the water. What are you doing? That's what they do. Yeah, whatever. But I'm saying that just for your own enjoyment, that you're not allowed to do. There's a story of the previous Rebbe was walking with his father. They're taking a walk, and they were talking deep stuff. And absentmindedly, the previous Rabbi, he was a kid then, he took a leaf off the tree and he was like tearing it as he walked. And his father said to him, what gives you the right? What gives you the right to destroy that leaf? Don't destroy it. You want to use the leaf to eat, to cook, to wear, whatever. That's fine. But just absent-mindedly to destroy something, a creation, even if it doesn't have feelings, is absurd, is unacceptable. Interesting, right? Perspective. This idea that the needs of an animal are secondary to the needs of man can help us understand another law of our mitzvah as well. Chinuch mentioned that if one encounters two people who are both in a situation in which they require help with the animal at the same time, one a friend and the other an enemy, he's required to give precedence for helping the animal of his enemy. Even if his friend's animal is suffering under a heavy burden and waiting to be unloaded, he's required to give precedence to loading the enemy's animal in order to suppress his hatred. But why does the law of animal pain not demand the opposite? So Minchas Chinuch explains that this matter can be understood based on the above premise. Man's need to refine his character and to purge feelings of hatred toward another Jew from his heart from his heart are no less important than his physical needs, which are given priority over the needs of an animal. So your emotional needs and your character development needs are more important than the pain of the animal. Therefore, he's required to give precedence to his enemy's animal in order to suppress his hatred, even if his friend's animal is in pain. For here too, his own needs have a greater priority than the needs of the animal. This is a very, very interesting concept. We're touching on a beautiful section of Jewish law, which is Talmudic. It is the concept of animal pain, animal cruelty, and the limits of that. We know that we eat animals. We know that we slaughter animals. So what is the importance of animal pain vis-a-vis human dignity and human character development? So we know that humans are above animals. A human being is higher than an animal. You know, it says that Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. Why did the lions lick his feet and not attack him? Because the animals are naturally afraid and submissive of human beings. But when a person sins, he violates his divine image. And the animals now no longer see the divinity upon him. They only see him as a piece of meat. And that's why they would attack him. If you want to know if your rabbi, if you don't know if your rabbi is a good rabbi, throw him in the lion's den. Or let your dog decide. Dogs love everybody. But seriously, when you see a dog that's barking incessantly at someone, you know that there's something a little off there, you know. But when the dogs come and naturally love someone, you see that they sense something, godly over there. So human beings are naturally higher than animals if you didn't violate your divine image. And even if you did, you can do teshuvah and repair it. But and it takes just a moment to do teshuvah. But if a person is an active sinner, then the animals don't see him as anything greater. So the vart is to vera mensch, to be a person, to be a human being, and fulfill the divine purpose for which we were created. Because if you see your mission upon this earth is just merely to, what do they say? Something because tomorrow you die. If the purpose of life is just to live and to wine and dine and just to hedonistic pleasures, then you're like an animal. But if you're here for a divine purpose, for a divine dispatch, a mission of making this world a home for Hashem, then it's a whole different ballgame. Winston, first question: before Adam and Eve committed their first transgression, did they not need animal protein? Second question: was the animal slaughtered for their transgression? So they did not need animal protein, correct. Second question: was the animal slaughtered for their transgression? Was the animal slaughtered? It was a different kind of divine service. Is more than a 2-second answer. In the beginning, the mission of Adam and Eve was to live in a messianic reality. But once they sinned, the world descended into a new purpose, which was to uplift the physicality of this world. And therefore, every time we eat an animal or a flower or a plant or an inanimate, and we use it for a mitzvah, we're uplifting this physical world. A foundational concept in Tanya. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up over here. Have a lovely day. Thank you for joining me today. Shalom and have a good day.